When your Social Security payment doesn't arrive on time, you naturally worry about things like paying your bills, buying groceries, managing your expenses. These are all real concerns when something goes wrong with the payment from the SSA. The good news is that the reason for the late payment is usually pretty easy to identify, and the fix is usually straightforward because once you identify the problem, you simply need to fix the problem, and then the check starts coming again. The bad news is that it could take weeks to get the problem fixed if you don't know exactly how to manage the issue. And this video is about how to manage those issues to turn weeks into days. So up next, we're going to cover off the most common reasons that your Social Security payment is delayed. Now, even if your payment isn't delayed, it's important to watch this video because at some point in the future, it will probably happen to you. And then you'll think, I remember why this might be happening because Schmidt told me 6 months ago, 1 year ago, 3 years ago, that these different scenarios might happen, and I identify one of those as something that is going through my life right now. Now, let me give you a very concrete example, one that's near and dear to my heart because it happened to a friend of mine who was from an old job of mine many, many years ago, and she saw the channel, and she called me up, and we talked through the issue and resolved it in just a couple of minutes. But she didn't know what the issue was until we chatted. Let's call her Margaret. Margaret switched banks last year, and she carefully submitted the correct information to the SSA. She filled out the application. She gave the SSA her information, was meticulous about putting the right numbers in the right spot, and the bank that she had originally banked with had closed. So she needed to do this. It wasn't her choice. It was just the situation she was in. Margaret accidentally transposed 2 numbers on the form, and her $2,400 per month Social Security payment just magically disappeared. And she had no idea why, because no one had contacted her. She didn't receive an email. She didn't receive a phone call, a letter, nothing. It just never arrived. So she called me. I told her that it's very likely that she got the numbers wrong. She swore that wasn't the case. But then she called the SSA, and they went through the information with her, and she got the information wrong. Her numbers were off. They told her it would take up to 6 weeks to fix the error, and this created a lot of stress in her life. The good news is it did get fixed. She got all the back money that was due to her, and she's now caught up on all of her bills, but it did put a lot of pressure on her to figure out the problem in a situation she didn't even see coming. All right, let's talk about things you need to know to audit the missing payment, just to make sure that you've got the data right. First is the date you're actually supposed to get paid, because a lot of people get that wrong. Social Security payments come either the second, third, or fourth Wednesday of every month, depending on your birth date. If you were born between the 1st and the 10th, it comes on the second Wednesday, the 11th to the 20th, third Wednesday, and so on. The only exception to this is if you started receiving Social Security before May of 1997, then it comes on the 3rd of the month. Unless the 3rd falls on a weekend or a holiday, then it comes the previous business day. So before you panic, make sure that you understand the day that you're supposed to receive your Social Security payment. This is by far the most common error, and it's not really a Social Security Administration error. It's just a understanding error where people think that they're supposed to receive it on a certain Wednesday, and it's not there. In reality, it's the Wednesday after. Now, assuming that the date is actually passed and the payment was supposed to be there, but it's not, now it comes down to what are the most common reasons. If you're a new applicant, the most common reason is that you're a new applicant, and there's either a delay processing your paperwork, there's a delay at the SSA, which is very common these days, or there's missing information and they just haven't gotten a hold of you yet. Maybe your historical earnings information is complicated and they need more information on it. Some, maybe even most, get processed right away and it goes through as it should, but there are a few that have a hiccup. And if you're one of those few, well, getting to the bottom of the reason for the hiccup is of paramount importance. But what happens if you're receiving your Social Security payment and it's coming in regularly like you expect it to, and suddenly it's not there? You're sure that the date has passed and it hasn't arrived. Well, the most common reason is banking information has changed. You've closed an account, you've switched banks, or you've changed your account number because maybe you had fraud in your account, who knows? The banking change issue happens very frequently. Even if you stay at the same bank, even if you have the same checking account, if you've moved branches or your address has changed with the SSA and now they can't reconcile the address that you're showing them with the address that they're supposed to be sending it to, or at least the address that they have on file, because most people receive their payment electronically, that could stop the payment. Changes to your personal information, like a marriage, a divorce. One of those two means that your last name may have changed and they can't marry up, no pun intended, your name with what they have on records with the SSA. These personal information changes happen all of the time. And when they do, they trigger a fraud alert with the Social Security Administration. The problem with the fraud alert is that it does need to get cleared before they'll make the payment. And the good news is that they are watching, so people aren't going to, or are far less likely to fraudulently claim your Social Security payment because of these fraud alerts. Next is that you went from working to not working, you filed for Social Security, and then you started working again. Maybe it was a part-time job. Maybe it was consulting. It doesn't matter what it is. If you exceed the earnings limits, the SSA will withhold a portion or all of your Social Security check, depending on how much you earned. In 2025, if you earn more than $23,400, then anything in excess of that amount, you have to give $1 back for every $2 over that amount with the SSA. If this is the year that you reach full retirement age, but you haven't reached full retirement age yet, then the threshold is $62,160. For every $3 above that amount, you have to give $1 back to the SSA. The earnings test catches many retirees off guard because they forget about it. And because they forget about it, when they land that dream job, in the back of their head, they're thinking, wow, I have a lot more money this year than I had before. That's great. I can afford to do things that I couldn't do before. I know someone who went out and bought a car because they had both a job and Social Security payments. It was a bit of a shocker when they realized that they had to give part of their Social Security payment back. A fourth reason, which doesn't happen nearly as much, it's benefit recalculation. It's the death of a spouse. It's a divorce. It's an error in your earnings record that they figured out, and now they're recalculating your Social Security payments. These recalculations can temporarily pause your Social Security payment, although they are supposed to send you a letter. Sometimes that letter doesn't arrive until the funds have not hit your account. Now, those are the most common reasons, but you're not watching this video simply for the most common reasons, so I'm going to tell you other specific situations which could happen to you, but they're less likely to happen to you. But if they do, this will help you identify what they are. The first is international travel. If you travel outside of the country to places like Russia, Cuba, or North Korea, admittedly the third one would be less likely, then the SSA can suspend your payment until you get back in the country. If you're incarcerated for more than 30 days due to a criminal conviction, the SSA can stop your payment until you're subsequently released. Government debt offsets can also affect your Social Security payment. If you owe back taxes, if you are late on your student loan, or if you're in default on your student loan, or if you have other government debts, these can all be offset with your Social Security payment. And administrative errors. Now more than ever, these can happen. I would say that they're still very unlikely, but they can happen. And when they do happen, because you had no trigger event like we talked about before, they can be quite confusing. And you actually need to talk to the SSA to find out what the issue is. Now the most important part. If this is you, you need an action plan. And the plan I'm going to give you is organized in very logical steps that are quite effective. First, contact your bank and make sure that the deposit actually didn't arrive. Or make sure that it's not in transit, meaning that it arrived but it hasn't been posted to your account yet. You'd be surprised at how often that second part is what people get really worried about because they don't see it in the account, but yet it's already there. In fact, many payment disappearances aren't on the end of the Social Security Administration, they're on the end of the bank. There's a holiday, or they themselves are a little behind processing payments. It happens all the time. If that's not the case, log into your My Social Security account and check to make sure all of your personal details are correct. Everything, your name, your address, your bank account details. Make sure that you scan it over and make sure that everything that is on there is current with the way that your life is now. If you spot any mistakes, make the change, fix the mistake, and then contact the SSA to tell them that there was a change in your account and ask them to expedite the payment. If none of that occurred, then you need to call the SSA directly at 1-800-772-1213 to discuss it with them. The fact is, they do have the information. It's probably in the notes with your account, and somebody who would have made the switch, because it doesn't just switch off on its own, somebody who made the switch would also put the information in the notes for the next person who would get the call. When you call, have your social security number, your bank information number, and any correspondence handy so that you don't have to call back. And ask for time to resolution. They should be able to give you a good idea of how long things will take. And then, no matter what they tell you, ask if they can make it faster. And in the rare instance that none of that works, you have to go see them. A face-to-face meeting with the SSA is quite important. When you show up, you may have to drive an hour or two depending on how far the office is, but oftentimes a face-to-face discussion with someone at the SSA will solve the problem. For new applicants, the SSA recommends that you wait at least 60 days from the time you fill out your application. And for those that are waiting for a payment, they recommend waiting 1 week past the payment date before you contact them. And if your payment was withheld due to income limits, ask for an earnings estimate review to make sure that the numbers that they are using are this year's numbers and not last year's numbers, which happens quite regularly when a mistake is made. And remember this about Social Security late payments: the issue almost always gets resolved, and people eventually get every penny that's due to them. While waiting for resolution, there are several financial bridges that you can use to pay your bills. Ask your bank for a temporary loan, and if absolutely necessary, look into a hardship withdrawal from your retirement account, although this is something that you really don't want to do if you can avoid it. And prevention is 9/10 of the cure, so to speak. Make sure that you're signed up for direct deposit, that you have a My Social Security account, and if you're going to make changes to any of your information, that you do it several weeks before those changes actually occur. Document all communication that you've had with the SSA, including the representative, the date, the time, and what you talked about. Having this information can dramatically speed up the process of getting your Social Security back on track. And just anecdotally, the Social Security Administration probably won't contact you about payment issues until after they've withheld the payment, because they assume that if the money hasn't arrived, you will contact them. If you like this video, please make sure that you like it. YouTube uses the number of likes in a video to raise it in the search results, and I want to help as many people as possible. Also, if you know someone who can use this information, don't forget to hit the forward button below and send it to them. This is Jeff Schmidt, and I will see you in the next video.